Hello, my name is Brent Skinner, and I am co-founder of 360 Insights, where I lead the HCM practice area as its principal analyst. And today we have as our guest on the latest episode of our video podcast, HR Tech Chat, Doug Dennerline, who is CEO of Betterworks. And Betterworks is a company whose tagline is closing the loop between people, strategy, and results. Very much looking forward to my conversation with Doug, whose pedigree and credentials are very formidable, and he has a lot of insight and wisdom to share around people enablement, performance management, goal setting, and all the rest. Welcome, Doug.
You know, as people are returning to work in this new work environment that we're all sitting inside of, people realize probably now more than ever, even though they probably realized it for the last 10 years, that the annual performance review process is pretty broken. You know, it was created literally 70 years ago for hierarchical organizations. You know, there's not that much hierarchy in organizations today. The person you work probably the least with is your manager. You know, it's within people in the organization. It's all, you know, outside interactions. It's not with your manager. And so we've been talking about moving this process to something that is not so HR driven and more compliance driven, because, you know, Deloitte would tell you that the research around performance, you know, it doesn't change performance. People hate the process. People hate getting it. People hate giving it, and it doesn't work. And so we need to find something that actually helps people. And we think that's more around the enablement side, which is making it something that the individual contributor actually sees value in versus what they used to do before.
You got my spidey sense going here. You mentioned Deloitte, and you said that there's research out there that says, you know, that performance review does not improve performance. And so, yeah, well, yeah. And what are we trying to do? We're trying to optimize performance. We're trying to help employees be better at their jobs. So it's yeah. So do you think we're just going away from performance assessments, like official assessments, or are we just moving away from that completely? Like, how's that going to work?
Well, a little background on me. I'm also the ex-president of Success Factors, and so we were really at that point in time the company that was the first to build HR performance products and put them into the cloud, and based on the annual performance review. You know, I think what I'm trying to do here, along with my fellow, you know, employees and all the people inside of Betterworks, is build something that actually changes the outcome. So we center our conversations, these lightweight conversations, quarterly conversations between manager and employee, based on a methodology called OKRs, objective and key results. And you know, one of our key investors is John Doerr, and he's literally the son of the OKR methodology. He's basically taught it to every portfolio company he ever invested in. And so the conversation is, well, what are your goals this quarter? Not only what are you doing for the company so you're aligned to the company's top goals, but what do you want to accomplish in the company? And as your manager, how can I help you achieve those goals? And so the employee actually sees the benefit. Wow, my manager is talking to me about me, helping me grow inside the organization. And I also know that my work's actually tied to the company achieving its goals. And one of the stats, Brent, I love is 78% of people in companies really don't understand how their work actually helps the company achieve anything. You know, so you get a big increase in engagement when you come to work every day and you actually know that your work is helping the company achieve what it's trying to accomplish.
Yeah. You know what's interesting about that too is, to my mind, it also increases, well, how to put this? So if you look at the employee experience, right, there's a lot of employee engagement. It seems that a lot of companies where there's low employee engagement, I might just be sort of hypothesizing here, but I'd be surprised if I were wrong, if this were incorrect or inaccurate. It seems like a lot of companies where there's low employee engagement, there just is really not much appreciation on the employees' part for their contribution to the organization, and there's not enough attention paid by the organization to help employees feel good about, or sort of positive informing to them of what their contribution is. So the OKR methodology, which I am familiar with, it just dawned on me now though that's sort of a built-in, almost default employee engagement and improvement approach.
No question. And we see that in our customers. They see a pretty good increase in employee engagement, confidence in leadership, understanding of strategy, and when they do surveys. Now, I would tell you, it'd be interesting, Brent, to see what the correlation would be to engagement score and Great Resignation. Especially what's happening, all these hiring that we've done. Imagine being hired in the middle of COVID and having physically never met your manager. Yeah. I think a good portion of the resignations we're seeing from people that have never met the company formally, but over Zoom.
That I wouldn't be surprised one bit. Where do you find, is there any particular industry or type of size company where your approach is especially especially effective, or does it run the gamut? I mean, does it work? I mean, I'm sure it works everywhere, but do you find areas where it's particularly effective?
I think it happens everywhere in all size companies. And if you look at the growth of our company and some of our competitors, you see growth at the low end. But where we're kind of focused on is we're going after companies that have these old, antiquated, 25-year-old software applications that do old performance reviews, and wanting to move them to something that's more lightweight, more continuous, again, more advantageous to the individual seeing benefit from it. Any HR process is kind of what we would consider a tax on the employee. And we have a saying internally that we want to make the value of the process greater than the tax of it, so that they're willing to go in and do it. And they go, wow, my manager, I'm having meaningful conversations with my manager mid-quarter, end of quarter, not once a year, not twice a year. Where it's been difficult for HR people though, Brent, is there's so many downstream processes tied to the annual review or the rating that we used to, that many companies still do, unfortunately. I'm a big believer in not rating people because I think in most cases you might have more performers in the top 10% or 15%, and not telling the middle 75% you're just mediocre and we're not going to invest in you in the way we are to the people at the high end. And so it's finding those progressive HR people with a progressive CEO that says, I know my most important asset is my people. And finding an HR person that says, what, I'm going to move away from those processes of the past and be more invested in what's the company trying to accomplish, and let me help the company achieve its goals with helping people perform better.
What kind of pushback do you encounter to this type of approach? So let me play devil's advocate for a moment here. Let me preface this by saying this is not my opinion at all. But if you run into somebody who says, we're not going to evaluate people anymore, we're not going to rate them, how do I know? I mean, some of my people are they're terrible performers. I need to be able to fire people. I need some sort of an audit. People should be evaluated. This is all, it's everybody gets a trophy. What's this all about?
Yeah, the participation culture. No, you still have to come up with ways to evaluate where your best performers are and your weakest performers are. I don't know that it has to be a number 1 to a number 5 rating or a 1 to 4 rating. I think there's other ways that you can evaluate through assessments that you can do. We happen to believe in, I'm kind of reinventing this thing called the 9-block process with calibration. In the past, it's been very much, the notion is one of the axes is your ability to perform, and the other axis is, how much scale do you have as an individual inside the organization. So the 9-block would be high performer, ready to get a promotion. A 1 block would be non-performing. We should put them on a list to make sure that we either help them get to perform or they need to go find something else to do where they can perform better than they are here. And we used to do that based upon people coming into a room, the managers debating on who's better than my employees are better than your employees. And we're using all the data inside of our application around feedback, recognition, your goal attainment, all these different assets that sit inside of our product today to actually take that data and put you into the appropriate box in the 9-block and then calibrate against that, but do it on based on somebody's performance, their body of work, not what, the HR industry calls, this whole biased situation. It's, who can debate the best about who's going to do well in the organization as an employee.
Right.
Recency bias, they call it.
You walked right into, and I'm glad you did, something I wanted to just broach right here is that, in the past, it seemed, with performance reviews and assessments, a lot of it feels political to employees, right? And it seems to me that the 9-block assessment that you mentioned, that can take a lot of that out of it, right? And so it seems more less confrontational, less of an attack, and more of a even an opportunity even for employees.
And it also depends on the company. I've also been at Cisco Systems as an executive there, where I had 6,000 employees. And some companies want to be fully transparent and show people where they land on a 9-block. And other people and companies don't want to, because you can get a negative effect from this kind of effort as well. But I think it's important. You need to identify where your top performers are and who's got mobility, who needs to be your next executives, who are the people you're betting on in 5 years and 10 years from today, and making sure that you're enabling them to become the executives that they need to be. So it's done so many different ways, Brent, but strong leadership teams are more bent on transparency than not. And so, being honest with people and, giving feedback to people is a very difficult thing to do. And we try to create those conversations and also coach people on, we have a coaching capability in our company that you can take classes on how to be a good coach and how to give, candid feedback to people about their performance. So that's important. And I think in terms of companies that work on a culture of transparency, do better than those that don't. Yeah.
You mentioned, essentially grooming the company's next leaders. I mean, this obviously is a succession planning exercise as well. And when you can bake that into another process, all the better. Couple things that made me think of this just now is that, some of the knocking down of silos in HCM, right? And in talent, I hate the term talent management, just between you and me and all the podcast viewers here. The term talent management is just, I don't know. And it's kind of going away, right? And there's a lot of silo thinking where we have these sort of, I would say, preconceived or artificial partitions between activities. And it's more of just a way to talk about it, right? Or a way to think about, okay, I need to have some software for this or for that. I need software for succession planning or software for, compensation management or whatever. But what we're really talking about is, what you're talking about is where I think it's going. HCM, all of HCM is going where it kind of blends, right? There's a big blending.
Well, again, given my background, I think there's, a few very successful large HCM platform providers where it's, cradle to grave. It's an ATS all the way to offboarding somebody. It's a core HRIS application, a bunch of other applications. Well, I'm kind of a believer that building software is a cyclical thing. There's a time for best of breed, and then there's a time for a platform where best of breed gets more difficult and there's too many applications that are going on out there. But the other thing about building software is your core DNA. Are you a systems of record builder, or are you a systems of engagement builder? Okay. Do you build things that people in IT deal with, or do you build things that people in the company, everybody in the company has to deal with? And I think many of those successful companies out there today are more around the back end, not the front end. And so our success really is coming at some of those large HCM providers where people aren't enjoying the annual performance review process that exists in there. And HR goes, I'm going to put another best of breed application in. So we're aimed at that suite around performance. And we want to call it performance, enablement, not management.
Yeah, there's that word management again. We want to get away from that with whether it's in HCM or talent management performance, right? You want to get, and then I like the term enable, but you know what's interesting there, what you mentioned is you think about points, best of breed point solutions, right? I think a lot of folks, there's sort of just an assumption or a reflexive, idea that, okay, there's going to be the next breed of performance management point solutions or succession planning point solutions, or to a lesser extent, maybe scheduling point solutions. I think that's a different animal, WFM. But at the same time, no, the new best of breed point solutions are are kind of doing away with the old siloed thinking, which is really interesting. It's almost it's even though it's called a point solution, it's actually an overlay.
You as a provider of a platform with the cradle to grave stuff, you can't be great at everything, right? The amount of venture capital that's going into companies like my own that are trying to take a specific process inside of HR and make it substantially better for meeting the needs of today's workforce is a significant amount of money. And I think what might happen a little different than the past too, Brent, is, in the day, we built software that was just monolithic. It was just a giant code base, and it was all mangled together. And every time you changed one thing, you had to test it across the platform. To building software in microservices now, you can take these best of breeds platforms in the future and go, well, they're the best, they're the best, they're the best. And you can put those together quite easily in today's environment around building software, because they're all microservices and you can just intertwine them together quite easily. Very different than the past where you kind of had to build everything.
What's interesting there is, and there's a place for everyone. There's a place for both approaches. But what you're describing is, and I know we're getting a little bit off the beaten path here, but it's super interesting. Is that's an argument for the sort of there's the argument for sort of cradle to grave, end-to-end HCM suite, but then there's some of the emerging realities. I think it's that you're describing there are pointing toward the other direction, where maybe we're going to move away from these suites. Who knows? I mean, if you're a platform system of record, right? Then you're really like embedded into that employer's ecosystem, and you're going to need that. But yeah, I think there's some of that going. This is a little bit of a leap, but I want to go back to something. We've talked about HR and performance, or your people enablement, or however we want to call it, right? What is HR's role in the performance enablement? What is HR's role in performance enablement? Put it that way.
I think it's dramatically different. I've been selling to people in HR for years now, and it's very clear to me when some companies, and I just did by the way, we just had a webinar, and one of our keynote speakers was Indra Noy, the past CEO of PepsiCo. And she said, you know what I did, Doug? I brought one of my best operators in that off my board of directors, and I made him my head of HR. And by the way, I took my best operator in my company and made her the head of HR, because it's finding HR people that are really focused on the results the company's trying to accomplish, and then enabling the processes internally to engage the employees to help them achieve those goals. It's not just to say, let me help you hire and fire and not get sued. It's about really being at the table and understanding what's going on in the business and helping them get there.
This fits in with one of our themes for 2022, and it's around bringing HR out of the back office and to the front lines, right? And you mentioned operations. Speaking with vendors, there are a lot of vendors where their solution, where it sits is precisely where the employee interacts with their manager, or where the employee needs to be armed with information or capability as they interact with the customers on the front lines. And right, that's if you think of it spatially as HR being sort of this central function, right? It typically is. It doesn't mean it has to act centrally all the time, but it's, if you think about it spatially, that's far away, just spatially from over here, right? Where that actual employee experience is taking place. And so it seems to me that that HCM technology, we might not even call it HCM in the near future. So I'm trying to use some terms that people will understand here, but at the same time, I'm so excited about how these terms are changing. But it seems to me that HCM is for everybody. It's not just for HR.
Again, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to move that process into the hands as a benefit to the employee and making them control it. It's like, in our software, you go in the beginning of each quarter and you sit with your manager, write your goals, put it in the application. And then middle of the quarter, you do a check-in, and you do that through going in and answering a couple of questions saying, are you achieving your goals? What roadblocks have you hit? How can I help you remove those roadblocks? Are your goals correct? Maybe we focused on the wrong things this quarter, and we need to redirect in the middle of the quarter. And again, that's a benefit to the employee. I'm having meaningful conversations with my manager about my work, not getting surprised at the end of the year that I got rated low in the company because my manager didn't have a clue what I do for work every day.
Yeah.
So again, it's moving the process into the hands. And especially in a big company, Brent, where they have HR business partners who really are trying to help a function in the organization achieve its goals and are much closer to the business because they sit, even though they're line reporting to HR, they sit in the business next to their client.
Yeah.
And we're giving them the tools to help them do that successfully.
Yeah. And how does the HR person sort of sit in that scenario, that interaction between the manager and the employee that you just described? Like, what's the evolving role of the HR person? Because it's always been that sort of that audit, well, not an audit trail, but that sort of that, how do you say, the enforcer, or the, when things get super bad, for instance, right, between a given employee and it's his or her supervisor, right? That's when it kind of goes to HR, it gets escalated. So that when the interaction is super bad, all of a sudden HR comes in, and right, and HR doesn't want to be just that. A lot of HR aspires to be sort of the inverse of the other side of the coin on that, the positivity and all of that. And when we think about how this stuff is moving farther and farther away spatially from HR, if we're going to accept that premise, and I don't even know if I accept the premise myself, but if we're going to go with that, right, then how does HR sit in that?
Well, I mean, again, that's the goal here, is to get them out of being the enforcer of these processes, which is what they've been in the past. They're bugging people to get the reviews done, and we're coming up against the deadline, or forcing people to get into a 9-block, room to have this conversation. It's just, they feel terrible. With us, HR is not involved in that conversation, but at the backside of those quarterly conversations, we actually have these confidential questions that are between HR and the manager on things like, what's the risk of loss of this person? What's the opportunity for this person to be promoted in the organization? So not things the employee sees, but it's getting HR involved, the things that matter. There's also, again, what we're trying to do here, Brent, too, is use as much data science as we can, and finally giving HR data to do their job. So as the intelligence inside of artificial intelligence gets better in the HR space, with things like natural language processing, we can actually do sentiment analysis based upon the conversational data manager and employer having in our application. And we can surface hotspots to the HR teams to say, hey, there's a really negative conversation happening with this manager and these 5 employees. You might want to get involved with that manager. And again, giving something they never had before. Now, it's not where it needs to be yet because of the natural language processing capabilities, but we're working hard on it.
Yeah, that's key, right? So if I were to sort of characterize this, right? So HR has become sort of a coach, if you will, for managers in their performance in their efforts, in managers' efforts to enable their people, to enable the performance of their people, right? And now we're back to that sort of perennial, very important and and obviously very applicable narrative that the HR department needs applicable data, needs actionable data that's accurate, and that's not only predictive but maybe even prescriptive analytics associated with that, so that it can be as useful to the management function or the leadership function of the organization.
Yeah, and that's true. But we also need to do things like build software that large organizations can do for auditability, that can look back and say, did the performance of this person and the firing of this person match? Those kinds of things that are super important. Or accessibility, or permissions. There's a lot of sophistication in that software as well. But in the interaction between manager and employee, that's what we're trying to move away from HR. And through the application, as an example, when you have this conversation in our application, at the end of it, you basically check a box as the employee and as the manager saying, this actually occurred. I've had a conversation, we face to face, even in the application. You click a box that says it's actually occurred. And so HR knows where those hotspots are, where these conversations aren't happening and are happening. And it's through the technology that gives them that information.
I mean, honestly, that's super important to be able to step in and stop some of these festering, potentially bad situations from really being deleterious to the employer culture. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Future of work. Let's talk about that a little bit, because I'd like to hear a little bit about a little bit of your vision, Doug, around where you think this stuff is going in the next, I like to say the near future of work and the distant future of work. Where do you think things are going in the next few years and maybe 10 years from now?
Yeah, it's super interesting for me, Brent. And again, having worked in a really large organization, and now Betterworks, it's probably one of the smaller organizations I've ever been a part of as a leader, is the insights I picked up when I went through this whole pandemic. I used to be one of those people that said, hey, I want my leadership team, near me and around me, and in an office environment. And so that restricted me to have people that were willing to drive however long they wanted to drive, but to show up to work every day, to being something where our culture is going to be remote first. We spent the last 2 years finding the most amazing people we can find, no matter where you work, and hiring them. Now, a little bit, again, my background too is I was the CEO of WebEx for 3 years. And that was in the early, it was 97. And I thought, boy, why would anybody get in an airplane ever again when they can do all this screen sharing and video sharing over WebEx?
Yeah.
Well, it took a pandemic to teach the world that this capability, and Eric Yuan and Zoom has built and brought to the world fantastically enough, and the applications that support that, other business applications, that you can be incredibly productive and effective in this environment. And I think, well, you have to find this balance of coming to the office on occasion, meeting with team members, meeting with leadership, but not every day, and leading this way a bit, and you'll find great talent. And I think some of those companies, and I've seen this, that are kind of forcing people back to the office, people are saying, you know what, I don't want to live in that environment anymore, and I'm going to choose to do something differently. And people are going to go, and the future work is, I want to go to a company where they have a great culture, they're invested in me as a person, they're working on things that with purpose that matter in the world. It's not just all about just making money. And supplying the experiences that you get when you come to a company that enable them to have that. And I think there's a lot of great things in software development today that are taking people there.
Yeah, you mentioned remote first, and it reminded me of a stat I saw, and I'm rounding the percentage because I don't remember the exact percentage, but something like only 20% of employees in New York City are at the office I think it's more than 3
Yeah.
days a week right now, or even 1 day a week. I think, yeah.
Yeah.
Excuse me, fewer than 20% are there 5 days a week, and the rest are doing hybrid or work from home completely, which is just that is amazing.
Well, I think I think that's partly due to the pandemic, and now we have Omicron, and it's frightened people again. But I think post pandemic, it's never going to change back. I think people are now seeing that, and I can spend more quality time with my family. I call it work-life integration. Be at work when you need to work, and be with the family when you need to be with the family. I'm about accomplishment of work, not time doing your job.
Yeah.
Right. And that's an important quality for me as a leader as well. I want people to be, deliver the goods, and you can do whatever you need to do, but deliver the goods. And other time you spend, you can pick how you want to do that.
Yeah, yeah. What role do you, if you were to look way out into the future, and the great thing about way out in the future, there's no right or wrong, because by the time it happens, no one will remember this conversation, maybe. But if you were to think about AI's role, artificial intelligence's role, and assuming the apparent rapid pace, or maybe not so rapid pace of its of its evolution, right? What role is AI going to play in employee enablement in the future, or is it going to go back to performance management or assessment? If you were thinking dystopian, just to be fun with this a little bit.
It's going to be incredible. Actually, the AI is going to play a very important part. We just wrote an application that helps people author good OKRs. Right, as you're writing your OKR, if it's not worded correctly, we'll come in and say, hey, you need to have an active verb in an OKR, or your KR really should be more measurable than the one that you just wrote. We're going to be able to do coaching from in the application. So we're going to know, based upon the last performance conversation you had, that you're going to have a difficult one now. We can deliver in product content to you saying, here's how you begin a difficult conversation with an employee, and have a 90-second video vignette educating the manager on how to have that conversation. We're going to use AI to determine your performance based upon your body of work. I mean, the amount of things that we're going to be able to do in the future is going to be, we have 3 data scientists on board, and all they do is come up with creative ways. We can tell you, we did a hackathon about 6 months ago, and a couple engineers went and wrote an application based upon your interaction with our OKR application. It made a determination who's most likely to leave the company next, and it had like 97% accuracy of saying this person's not interacting with this product very much, and they end up being the people leaving the company. So the amount of intelligence, Brent, that's going to come out in what we do in the world of talent is going to be significant.
That's really exciting. One of the examples you shared was something that we did not cover too much, but I wish we had, or I'm glad you reminded me, is the whole tie-in with learning, right? Just-in-time learning, delivering that learning object to that person just at the right time, so that it's most effective, that has the most potential impact with that difficult conversation. Soft skills.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yep. I mean, Brent, we have an integration with Udemy today, and they're also a customer. So you can be having a development conversation and recommend a couple of classes, and it automatically develops an OKR, and you link it to the Udemy's library of classes. And so now your OKR is go take that course, which is going to help you round out your skills. We're trying to do significant tie-ins to things around development and learning.
That's really interesting, the way that's all holistic, and it kind of just
together.
I can't find the word. It's actually an easy word. I can't find it, but it's just this interrelatedness of all. That's probably the word I was looking for. Of all those functions to deliver a new kind of experience. That's fantastic stuff. Doug, this has been a fantastic conversation.
Well, thank you, Brent. I enjoyed talking with you.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. Can't wait for this one to go live. This has been a fantastic conversation.
Well, good. Take care. All the best to you.
Thank you. You too, Doug. Bye-bye.
I know.